Hello again. This is number 13 in the series 10 Minutes with John. Now, scriptures must always be interpreted and understood in their context, especially the words of Jesus. He said things in particular circumstances and as responses to particular questions or stimuli. And whilst we frequently quote verses that are relevant and mean something rich to us in our experience, it's always valuable to examine the context in which they stand, especially in the case of Jesus' words. And one of his most famous sayings is, "I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life." It's found in John 8, verse 12. And we quote it often, as we should. But it's not just a nice sentiment that Jesus was expressing, not just a feel-good statement from, as some people would say, a good or great moral teacher. It's a truth statement of absolute fact. The light of life is what every human being needs and longs for, and incidentally, what many try to offer or even to manufacture for themselves. And this is infinitely more than what the world calls a guiding light to help us. This light is the difference between death and life. For here Jesus is promising those who follow him and walk with him the light that he has, or that he is, and for us to have it as a possession. The question is, what were the circumstances that led Jesus to saying these words when he did? These profound words have a context, and it is this, that Jesus and those gathered around him, listening to him, had just witnessed darkness at work. We'll get to that in a moment. Darkness in the physical realm is not a force of energy in the same way that light is. Light is energy in the form of what physicists call photons, or packets or particles that may behave either as particles or waves within the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Darkness is not energy or energized in the same way. Darkness is simply the absence of light and potential. It is absence, not presence. It is only a fact when light is removed or covered. It's what we experience when no light is present. Nevertheless, darkness is tangible, in a sense visible, and can certainly be sensed. In that sense, it can have a presence because it impinges on our human senses. What is true in the physical realm is also true in the spiritual realm. And in that realm, there is light and there is absence of light. And there are malevolent forces who are always attempting to rob and diminish light, and actually to empower darkness. Satan, of course, is the Lord of darkness and employs darkness, but may also disguise himself as an angel of light. Spiritual darkness may masquerade as light. Actually, it was darkness masquerading as light that made its presence felt early one morning as a group gathered around Jesus in the temple precinct, and he was teaching them. He was speaking light, and darkness showed up and tried to overcome that light. They witnessed darkness at work. As always, it was one of those episodes in Jesus' life arranged by the Father, whose tender heart was seeking a sinful woman and desiring to lead her into light. Imagine the scene. Jesus had arrived in the temple precincts quite early in the day, and as usual, people gathered around to hear him, and he sat down to teach them. Suddenly, the scribes and Pharisees bring to him a woman who had spent the night in an adulterous liaison. Here it is in John 8. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, This woman was caught in adultery, in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that she should be stoned. But what do you say? John says, this they did, testing him. They said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger. I'm sure you know the rest of the story. I want you to notice the motives of the scribes and Pharisees. They were using this sinful woman as a pawn in their game, in an attempt to create a gotcha moment in which Jesus was the target. So notice verse 6. Their motive was to test him and that they might have something of which to accuse him. Their motives were dark. They were coming out of darkness. They were coming from darkness, pretending to be light. What they were too blind to see was that they were actually the ones being tested. By the way, the Greek word used here for accuse him is kategoreo, from kata, meaning against, and ageruo, to speak in the assembly. So they wanted something with which they could tell the world how wrong Jesus was. These Pharisees had already categorized, of course we get our English word categorize from that. They had already categorized the woman as deserving death, and now they wanted to categorize or pigeonhole Jesus as wrong and sinful and against the law of Moses, and they were prepared to use this woman for their dark purpose. Their hearts and their motives were dark. Darkness was at work. This was absence of light on display for all to see, a work of darkness being demonstrated and watched, just as Jesus was speaking light and life to a group of people. The darkness was in the Pharisees' and scribes' hearts, the motive and the character center of their life. Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks, said Jesus on another occasion. How true that is. And he also said, those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile a person. The words and actions of these men were coming from darkness, words of condemnation and blame. That's what darkness does. It condemns and blames. The problem with deception within is that it masquerades as light. It persuades us, and it persuades itself that it is light. It's what happens when the true light is resisted and replaced with something manufactured, something man-made, a work of deception. And it's typical of what the enemy of light will try to do when light is being revealed. Darkness or false light will try to overcome it. But as John said elsewhere, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Pharisaism was a reality in Jesus' day, and some of that darkness is in the church today too. But it exists even more in the world of unbelief. We see it in the so-called woke righteousness of man, as people attempt to be more righteous than God, with whom they have conveniently dispensed. And having discarded his light, they're busy trying to create light of their own so that they can say, we are the light of the world, and he who follows us will never walk in darkness. Its motive mostly arises from a dark place, and so it comes complete with all the ugliness of virtue signaling, hypocrisy, desire for attention and publicity, along with the denigration of others or the cancelling of others, and especially those who seek to walk by the true light of this world. The woman discovered him that day as the light of the world, who does not condemn, but who leads into liberty and life. Darkness condemns, light liberates. I encourage you to not be deceived by darkness masquerading as light, but to wholeheartedly receive and obey the one who said, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Amen.